I think for a lot of women, we'd like to pretend like that rage doesn't
Yes.
exist. It's like it absolutely does. And if you continue to pretend that it doesn't exist, it will control you rather than you being able to control it.
You are tuned into the Dr. Tina Show with Dr. Tina Moore. For more, visit drtyna.com. On this episode of the Dr. Tina Show, I finally got to bring on my friend, Dr. Stephanie Estima. She is seriously such a badass chick, and I adore her to no end. I recently got to know her better when I was on her podcast, and we had such a great time that we had to continue the conversation over on this platform. We talked about strength training and hormones and all the things that I love to double down on, but her perspective is so unique and important. She's a chiropractor first and foremost, and there's information inside this podcast that you absolutely have to hear. We also talked about what to do if you struggle with things like inflammatory arthritis or pain, and what you can do about that, and how you can still incorporate strength training, and why you must, and why it is absolutely non-negotiable to incorporate strength training into your day-to-day at this time in your life. If you are premenopausal, perimenopause, postmenopausal, it doesn't matter. You need to start this sooner than later, ideally. But at any age, you can add muscle, and you don't have a choice. I don't care what you think about it or if you want to do it or not. This isn't about anyone's feelings. This is about what you need to do to live as an optimized human, and really to retain your beauty and your strength so that you don't end up with a hip fracture or some other accident down the line as we age, especially for us ladies. So without further ado, let's jump in. Dr. Stephanie Estima, I am so excited to have you here today on the Dr. Tina Show. I was a honored guest on your podcast recently, and we became instant BFFs. So great to have you here today.
I am delighted to be here and to spend time with you. It's been, you were such a great guest on my show. We had such awesome feedback, and hoping to do the same for your audience today to give you and your audience value.
Absolutely. Well, first off, we just have to tell everyone that you've got some beautiful guns. So I think you should show them to the audience.
These guns? Yeah. These guns? Yeah. Or the ones out there. Yeah. Yeah,
yes. Okay. So we're going to talk about that today, because I ever so often bring on a guest to try to get through the message that I keep beating this drum on, which is strength training, perimenopause, menopause, why we have to do it. And I hope that with each guest, it lands differently for maybe the ones who aren't catching it yet, So we're going to do that today. And also, you are a fellow chiropractor, and I love you for that, because I think that that's such a beautiful, we were just talking off camera how really functional medicine is just appropriated from true old school chiropractic and naturopathic philosophies. And I think we should talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, I think, for me, I'm so blessed. There's sometimes I'm frustrated. I'm like, man, I picked the wrong profession because I don't have the right letters behind my name, in terms of like cultural authority and all of that. And then on the other hand, I am so grateful that I was taught by chiropractors about what real health means. I can very quickly, in back of the envelope, talk about this idea of like salutogenesis, which I was mentioning to you before we got rolling. Like chiropractors believe, naturopathic doctors believe that the body has an innate wisdom that when you give it the right tools, it will find balance, it will find health. I always like to say that, whenever you're feeling alone, just think that you have like 1.2 trillion cells in your immune system that are literally ready to fight and die for you at any moment, right? So I think that there's this idea that your body wants to be healthy. It wants to express health from within. And sometimes we need some external stimulus. And we'll talk about exercise. We'll talk about resistance training. We'll talk about stress management and nutrition and how those things can mediate health promotion. Yeah, I think we've kind of always been a little bit on the outside looking in. There's a really funny, I don't know if you ever saw this, but there's a Simpsons episode about chiropractors. The Simpsons are always great at predicting everything, but they had this I'll send you the link you can put in the show notes for people who want to look at it. But it's basically a Homer wants to become a chiropractor because he sees he's super flexible, super healthy, and then he goes to his doctor and he's like, oh no, they're not real doctors. But here, like unofficially, here's the number for my chiropractor because he's the one that helps me with my golf swing, So it's like, there's sort of this like long history of like love-hate relationship. I think it's getting better now, but I do still think that, we're sort of, at least in the health space, sort of looked at as maybe second class citizens still. I think it's changing when you have someone like you who's as brilliant as you are, and all the work that you've done to sort of bring awareness to regenerative medicine, and the work that you have and the work that I hope to do as well.
Thank you. I think it's all we can do is lead by example. And my background with chiropractics is actually really personal. My mom grew up in Gig Harbor. And as a child, my great grandmother, who my mom loves so much and talks about all the time, was an incredible woman. She used to run a house that we don't know exactly what it was for, but I think it was for women who needed a place to go, or maybe it was like, a home where she would feed people and they'd rent a room. And she was a kind of a big heavyset woman, and she had a deep understanding of herbal medicine and nutraceuticals and taking care of people in a holistic way. And my great grandmother would take my mom to the chiropractor up there. She doesn't know if it was an osteopath or a chiropractor, but she was not allowed to tell her parents about it. Because they didn't want the town to know that he was adjusting people. So everybody in the community that knew he was there was sort of like literally backdoor going to see the chiropractor, because they were witch hunted back then. And she learned so much from my grandma Lorraine, and she taught me a ton. And it was amazing because as I was going through chiropractic college and naturopathic school, I would text her because I was a really sick little kid. So my mom employed a lot of the strategies that her grandmother had taught her for me and my health. And I would send her text messages and say, like, this was right when texting started. And we've had those flip phones and you could send those cryptic text messages. And I'd be like, Mom, I just saw a study in class about X, Y, and Z that Grandma Lorraine taught you, And so like having our sort of folklore medicine that was passed down through the families be seen in studies and being presented in, medical programs. But I think chiropractics is so punk rock. We can literally fix shit with our hands. And that is why I became a chiropractor, because that was the only doctor that ever answered me. I was really sick growing up, and they were the only ones that would sit down, answer me, look me in the eye, talk to me, counsel me, teach me about nutrition. Always. It was always like, what you're eating is impacting what's happening to you right now, like period. That was always the message. And we literally can fix shit with our hands. Isn't it so handy? It's like,
it's really cool.
It's constant. Yeah. My puppy dislocated his elbow the other day, and I was like, tink, just done. Like I literally can fix the body with my hands. It's pretty cool.
There's been so many times with my kids now where they play soccer, and there's been like a really tough tumble, and there's everyone's sort of crowded around. I'm like, I'm just going to go and put my hands on him and see if he's okay. And, so I've sort of unofficially become, like the little team doctor that kind of goes over, and like I always have like my little kit of stuff, like my tape and my massage guns, but my hands are always my best tool, and they go everywhere with me. It's like fancy that, like I can just go on a plane. I still have all my techniques and my skill with me. So it is something that I feel very blessed to know.
Yeah, it's incredible. And when we add in all of the knowledge that we have around everything else, it's the clinical application of common sense. That's how I see it.
It's great. That's a great way to put it. I love that.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk. I just have to ask you how old you are, because I don't know, but I know that we're close in age.
47.
Oh, okay, great. Well, so you're a smoke show. Let's talk about how to stay a smoke show at 47.
And that's why you're my best friend.
This is what we'll title it. How to be a smoke show at 47. Right. But I want to tell the audience something first. We were in Vegas together at A4M because you spoke on the stage, and I saw you in passing in wherever we were, the atrium, and you and your husband, both very fit and very fashionable. You guys were headed to bed early, and you said to me, and I thought this was brilliant, you said, we have to stay on our time zone. We're trying to stay on the East Coast time so we don't mess up our circadian rhythm. So let's start there. Let's talk about that.
That's my trick for traveling. Yeah. So I live on the East Coast, and whenever I travel to the West Coast, obviously there's a 3-hour difference there for me. And I don't know, for whatever reason, it wrecks me. If I get on Pacific time and then try to get back onto East Coast, it completely wrecks me, especially when it's for a short little stint. Like we were in Vegas. So, we were there for 3 days maybe. So I stayed on Eastern time the entire time. So I woke up at, 2:00 Pacific time, which is just normal for me, which is 5 a.m. Eastern time, would, go and work out and go for walks and, all the things that I would just normally do. And then I was going to bed at I was in the, in our hotel room at about 5 Pacific, which is 8 my time, and like in bed at 6 p.m. Pacific. So, but it just helps me. I can punch out most of what I need to do. Like I was speaking on stage at a, reasonable time for both Pacific and Eastern time. But whenever I travel, I try to stay on my time zone. I find that that's very helpful for my energy. It's not too disruptive when I get back. And then I'm not struggling even when I'm there to try and like catch up to the local time.
I had never considered that. And when you said it, it was like, ding, brilliant. Cause I'm the same. I just go down when I have to go to the East Coast. It's awful. And then when I come back to the Pacific Coast, I'm down for the first 3 or 4 days. It's so disruptive and I've never been able to tolerate it well. So I'm going to try your trick. Although I'll have to think about how to do that opposite way, but I'll
Yeah. So when I travel to Europe, which is further east than me, my trick, well, when I fly there, I try to fly overnight. But when I get there, the first thing that I do is a workout. So it's at an insane hour for me. It's like working out at 2 a.m. in the morning, right? Because when you're in Europe, it's like 5 hours ahead, let's say. So it's like 7 or 8 o'clock local time. But I go for a workout. I will get in like a weight workout. Then I'll go and get some breakfast and I'll walk around and then I'll get back to my hotel. Usually check in Europe is like a little bit later. So let's say it's like at 1 or 2 o'clock. I leave my bags there to go do my workout and whatever. And then I check in and then I take a nap, like a little like hour, 2 hour nap. So it's like, 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock local time. I'll take a little nap and then kind of the rest of the day. And then I go to bed on time, local time there. So that's what I do when I travel east. So I just try to, especially when it's a bigger time jump, like Europe for me is like 5 or 6 hour difference. For you, it would be a much bigger, like if you're going from, the Pacific coast to Europe, it's going to be like an 8 hour difference. My best advice there is literally go for find a day pass, or we always research them in advance. So whatever hotel I'm staying at, I know if the hotel is suitable or not. And if it's suitable, great, I'll work out in the hotel gym. If not, I will join a gym for a week or however long I'm there. And I will get a training workout in, lots of walking, get a coffee, eat breakfast as if it was, breakfast my time, and then take a little afternoon nap there and then go to bed on time. And then I'm completely on European time, like from the day that I land.
This is genius. I'm going to try it. I'm going to see Oasis in June or July. And I'm so excited.
Oh,
I know.
Oh my God.
Wonderwall.
We're talking Wonderwall.
Yes.
Champagne Supernova. Oh,
in Manchester, where that's their hometown. And it's this big outdoor, like it's at a castle outdoors. So it's going to be a big festival and I'm so excited. But yes, I'm going to try that because last time I went to London last year, because I was on Diary of a CEO and I got there, we landed and I literally got into my hotel room and I fell on my face on the bed. Like I couldn't even get into the bed. I just fell on my face dead on the bed. And I woke up, I don't even know how many hours later. And I was a mess for 4 days. So I got to sort this out.
It sucks. Like when you go, I will say, so, when I am traveling to Europe, it really like heading to the gym is just awful because for me, it's like I'm going to the gym at 1 or 2 in the morning. So it doesn't like my body does not want to do that. But I will do whatever I can punch out. Maybe I take a coffee, maybe there's a little pre-workout in there. Maybe there's something to help me along. But I always feel better and I can instantly change, especially when I have the sunlight. If you're going and walking around, sort of, surveying the landscape or places that you're going to go to, finding your coffee shop, et cetera, getting that sunlight in the morning when you're walking around, also very, very helpful for me as well.
Okay. Good to know. And I'll share a trick that my mentor taught me. I'm not a big fan of high dose melatonin. I get asked this question a lot about melatonin. I'd love to actually hear your thoughts on melatonin as well.
It wakes me up. I don't know. I take it, I fall asleep and then I wake up 2 hours later. It's not your thing. I don't really take it.
He said to take he always taught me this, take 1 milligram of melatonin for every hour difference that you're trying to account for.
1 milligram melatonin for every hour.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
you would take, if you're traveling 8 hours, you take 8 mgs.
Yeah. And I'm not a big fan of bigger doses of melatonin. I will say that. But when you're just using it local time for your own, nightly use, if that's something people do. But I think that this trick works because by day 3, ironically, I had to get up the next day and be on Diary of a CEO. And I was panicking and I was texting he's now passed, but I was texting his wife and she said, And it's funny because Rick always comes to me and helps me when I need it. It makes me tear up. He always just like shows up in my thoughts when I'm at that point. And I'm texting her and she goes, well, Rick would tell you to take a milligram of melatonin for every hour that, time change. And I was like, oh my God, I totally forgot about that. And so I did it and I slept like a baby. It was great. So
That's
I
awesome.
know.
I've never used melatonin, to be honest, because I find locally, I've had sleep doctors on the show, and they all, everyone's like melatonin decreases as you age, so it's good idea to start supplementing with it. So I was like, okay, I'll try to supplement with it, and it wakes me up. So I don't know if it's just that my current levels are sufficient, and then this is just like super physiological levels for me. So I've never actually thought of applying it for jet lag or for I guess time travel.
Yeah, time travel.
But when we were time traveling. But I'll think about that for like, we're going to be in Europe at some point next summer. So that's a good tip too.
Yeah, try it. We'll see. We'll check back in. Okay, let's talk about strength training for the ladies and explain to the audience. This is a loaded question, but why is this absolutely non-negotiable as you age, especially?
Oh gosh. There's so many reasons. I would say that there's sort of three M's. Okay. So not the tape company, but three M's. So we have sort of a metabolic reason. We have a mobility reason. And for women in perimenopause who are still cycling, and even if you're in menopause, there's sort of a menstrual or menopausal reason. So let's talk about the mobility reason, because I think that that's probably the most obvious. Obviously, we're ambulatory. We want to be able to get around. We want to be able to squat and deadlift and do things in the gym, not just because it makes us feel good and it grows our glutes and we look great in jeans, but for when we're 75 years old and maybe we're living by ourselves and we trip and fall, we want to be able to have the proprioception in the joints, the mobility in the joints, and the strength in the legs, the muscles in the legs, be able to get ourselves back up. Another example might be, again, living alone and you need to open up a jar. How are you going to open up a jar if you have no grip strength, if you have no upper body strength? And we know grip strength is usually, I will say that I laugh a little bit because people are like, train your grip strength. It's like, no, grip strength is a byproduct of lifting heavy things. We don't need those little grip strength trainers that I've seen people try to pedal off. It's like, that's not doing anything. The reason why you have good grip strength is because you're deadlifting. The reason why you have good grip strength is because you're doing pull-ups. It's not because you're training your grip. Right?
Amen. Amen. Thank you for saying it.
So I'll just put that little piece in there. So mobility is really important. For women in particular, as we pass through or we have that menopausal transition, of course, we know that this is a sex hormone deficient environment, right? So we have lowered levels of testosterone, lowered levels of estrogen. And of course, that can have deleterious effects on our bone density. So again, back to that trip and fall example, you don't want to fall, what we like chiropractors will call this a foosh injury, like a fall on outstretched hand, FOOSH. That's like, we're nerds. We put acronym like, oh, that's a foosh injury. It's like, what? It's a fall on outstretched hand. If you were to slip and fall, let's say, like I lived through 4 seasons, right? There's like winter, spring, what are the other ones? Fall and summer. So in the wintertime, when there's ice and there's snow and maybe there's black ice, which is just, black ice is, it doesn't actually look shiny. It looks like there's no ice there. So you can walk on it and slip and fall on outstretched hand. Or if you don't get your hands out in time, you fall on your hip. You don't want those bones to be so brittle that they crack. Right? A healthy bone is one that actually is bendy. And I know that that's a little bit counterintuitive for the listener maybe to hear, but one of the hallmarks of a healthy bone is the ability to absorb the shock that's imparted onto it and then release it, which requires a little bit of suppleness. It requires that bendiness that I'm talking about. A brittle bone will not be able to absorb the force, and it will just crack underneath that force. So this is really, really important for women to understand. And we are more likely to develop osteopenia and then, of course, the disease state of osteoporosis in menopause because these anabolic hormones are low, right? So estrogen, we have estrogen receptors all over the body, including the bone. As we age, there's this accelerated bone breakdown. So, I know, that osteoclastic to osteoblastic ratio. So basically the cells in the cells that build up the bone, the blasts, the osteoblasts are slower in menopause than our osteoclastic bones, which are the cells that break down the bone. So it is very likely, if you're not training, that osteoclastic activity, those cells that break down the bone, are accelerating. So you have this sort of brittle state of bone. And then if you have something like, even, it doesn't have to be black ice. You can literally trip on a corner of a carpet. I've done that. Like I've tripped on, carpet corners before, and I've been able to catch myself. But if I'm like 75 or 85 and I fall, I don't want to crack anything. So that's sort of the first big reason. It's like you want to be able to have an appropriate response to, let's say, something like a fall, or to have the ability in the joints and the muscles to be able to get yourself up from a fall. So that's sort of the first M. That's mobility.
Can I pause you there?
Yeah.
Let's talk about this, because this is so important. So I've had two women in my life, two elderly women very close to me in my life, have a Fuchs fracture in the last 6 months. And in both cases, I immediately knew. One actually tripped off a stool. She was standing up on a stool. Pretty young, agile woman. I shouldn't say young. She's young for her age, agile, older woman, very lean though. And I could tell you she's osteopenic just by looking at her. Had a pretty decent fracture. And then just recently, another woman who's, farm strong, but also in her 70s, and just fell in a grassy knoll. And I mean, literally just like tripped over a bump in a grassy knoll, and it landed on soft earth. It wasn't hard. Same thing, not as traumatic, was able to just cast it. In the first case, the woman had to have surgery. This is the problem, guys. A 75-year-old woman going through surgery is a big deal. Going through general anesthesia is a big deal, and it gets harder as you get older. It gets harder to come out of that. It gets harder to survive it, and it gets harder to heal from that. And so it's not just the fracture that we're like, oh, well, put a cast on it. I mean, that's all and good, but we're talking mobility restrictions. If it's your hip, that is the kiss of death. Let's talk about that a little bit, because I don't think people understand. When I was in the gym in my early 40s, I remember I would go in there all the time by myself. I was single, and these young trainer guys would come flirt with me. And I was kind of a hotsy-totsy back then. And they would.
Oh, you still are.
Thanks. As my friend said, he's like, one day you're going to be hot for 50, but right now you're just hot. And now I'm hot for 50, which it's fine. I'll take it. But I was a little hotsy-totsy cougar back then. And these young guys were like, what are you training for? I'm like, to not break a hip. I mean, I wasn't even kidding. I would say also for the zombie apocalypse, which is kind of one and the same. But this hip fracture thing, like the way that goes is you usually end up in the hospital. If it's severe enough and you're osteoporotic enough, they won't even reset the hip. They just let you sit there until you die of pneumonia. It's awful. And if you do get surgery to put it back in, or to have it, bolted back together, basically, that's a massive surgery to have for somebody of that age. So let's talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I have some stats for you as well. I think that if you do have some type of hip fracture within the first year, 50% of people do not survive that first year, right? So if you have, 100 women, and all of them break their hips, 50 of them are going to die within the first year. Like a hip fracture, that, as you said, it is the kiss of death. If you are lucky, if you are the lucky other 50% that is able to have the prognosis to survive beyond that, the cognitive declines that you're going to experience from the immobility that you're going to have, as well, like you were saying, the recovery, even if they just are like, we're just going to let it, we can't do the surgery, we're just going to sort of let you, like your the statistical likelihood of you having some type of like superbug that circulates in hospitals is so high. And because you're not moving, because your immune function is so dilapidated and denigrated, you're going to be very susceptible to something that you like, the pneumonia, like you were saying, or some of these superbugs that you wouldn't otherwise be exposed to. Or even, we can kind of get into, germ versus terrain theory. But if you're not moving around and you're not stimulating the body, that is a party for a superbug to come in and take over and kill you. So I think that, Yeah, we want to be training so that our muscles are strong, but we know that the bones, like anything that the muscles do, the bones sort of are the sisters that follow suit, right? So whatever happens with muscle tends to happen with bone. When we have more lean muscle, we tend to have denser bones. And then, we can even get into like the quality and the type of bone, right? So it's like there's different kinds of bones. Like when you look at a femur, for example, there's two types of bones there, right? We have the cortical bone, which is the outside, like the shell of the bone, and then we have the cancellous bone inside. So both of those types of bones are going to proliferate underneath mechanical tension, which is like the lifting, the deadlifts and the squats and the lunges and the pull-ups and stuff. So we definitely want to be thinking about how can we save our beautiful grandmothers, or how can we save ourselves as grandmothers if we're lucky enough to kind of reach that stage in life by being able to deadlift at least our body weight,
Yes.
certainly, and we can kind of get into like, I like to think about certain, I don't think that the numbers are as important, but I think that there's good goalposts that we can sort of move towards in terms of how much we should be deadlifting, how much we should be squatting, that kind of thing.
I think I always think of it in terms of utility. So I should be able to deadlift my body weight for reasons of being helpful in society. And then my PR goal is my husband. I have to be able to deadlift my husband and pull him out of trouble. So that's he's not allowed to
Yes.
he's not allowed to get over 200
Or in
pounds.
case, or I don't know if we're going to get an explicit rating on this, but in case he FAFO, right? In case he F's around, and he'll find out if you can,
Yes.
deadlift his body weight, right?
I just think it's important. Yesterday I was doing a video for I'm doing this 21-day strength and resilience challenge, and it's closed now, but we're in it. We're in the middle of it. And I was doing unilateral moves. And one of the moves I like to do is where you do a step back lunge, but you rotate and touch your front toe. And then it's more for
gnarly.
Well,
that's so good.
But it's really just applicable to real life, right? Like we need to be able to step back, lunge, and rotate, because that's a natural movement pattern that you're going to need. And so I'm trying to teach these folks, I think it's probably mostly women in there. I'm trying to teach these folks, like, this is all applicable to real life. When we're talking deadlifting, we have to be able to pick up our kids or pick up groceries or pick up something and pick it up off of someone if they're hurt. Like, what if a big bookcase I always think like God, and I know we talked about this on your podcast, but like, God forbid something terrible happens and I can't help the person in front of me because I'm too weak. And I posed that question on my Instagram years ago in the stories, and I got so many responses from women saying, one woman told me that her kids were in a tractor accident and she couldn't even run fast enough to get there to help them in a timely manner. I had so many stories come in from women who were like, oh my gosh, I'm so out of shape that this terrible thing happened and I wasn't able to assist. And then other women saying, this terrible thing happened and I was so strong and I was able to help. It's like, which one do you want to be?
Yeah. God, that's, I can't even imagine the, in the aftermath, like the thought patterns that would go through my mind if I only just went to the gym, like I could have helped my kids, or I could have helped my neighbor, I could have helped whoever, but I wasn't strong enough to do it. Like that would be something that would haunt me.
Or fast enough. I was in Vegas actually at one of the malls there, and a woman lost control of her stroller. I don't know what happened, but the stroller, oh, no, I'm sorry. The little toddler ran off from the stroller. So the stroller started going and she was trying to stop the stroller and deal with the toddler. And the toddler was running right into the road. And I lunged and landed in a position, like in a very deep lunge. I think most women my age probably would have like hurt themselves doing what I did. And I lunged and grabbed the kid, and the kid just looked shocked. I grabbed her by the arm and she looked completely shocked, and I stopped her, and she was like this close to the road, and I turned her around and gave her back to her mom, and her mom's crying and she's like, thank you. I don't know what happened, but like too much was going on for her to, when you're postpartum, like you're not at your top speed usually. So it's things like that. Like we have to train for this shit because we don't know when it's going to come out of nowhere.
Yeah. Not all heroes wear capes. Yeah, that's a great story. I love that. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah. And don't fuck yourself up. Like don't allow a trip or a stumble to be what lands you in a hospital with a surgery, and any of us having, I don't want general anesthesia for any reason ever. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I the other thing too is like I just lost my thought. I'm so sorry. I was thinking about the general anesthesia thing. I think that we underestimate how fast we actually get there. I think that when we think about, oh, like from 20 to 30, didn't really notice that big of a difference, 40 to 50, meh, like, yeah, I'm starting to notice things, but you will literally fall off a cliff. Like the amount of decline that happens in men, even just look at our sex hormones, like your sex hormones drop to 1% of what they were, right? It's like they fall off a cliff. But I think humans don't often think, we often think more linearly. We don't often think exponentially. There is an exponential fall off. So if you're not doing the work now, whether you're 30, listen to the show, you're 40, you're 50, you're 60, like it doesn't matter what age you are, you can always improve. But if you don't do anything, the amount of decline just accelerates, and it accelerates at a rate that you could not have predicted, because we tend to think, we tend to think linearly. Well, it's just going to decline a little bit the way that it did from 20 to 30 and the way it did from 30 to 40. It's like, from 50 to 60 and 60 to 70, if you are not holding down the fort and you're not learning these basic movements, like you're talking about a hip hinge, I think a squat is like, we can get into the technicality of a squat. One of the most difficult things to execute well, because there's a lot of sort of moving parts, a lot of moving joints, and there's a lot of ways that it can go awry. But if you're not working on that now, it's not going to get better next year, and it's going to get much worse.
Yes, and
so I think we also.
Oh, go ahead. I'm
yeah,
sorry. No, I didn't mean to.
No, I just wanted to say, I think we have to think about this. What does it look like to decline exponentially versus linearly? Like, I think that there is a bit of a linear decline. If you think, 20 to 30, 34, you lose your sex hormones and you go in through menopause, and it's like, this is where it gets real. So I think that it is very important for us to start at least stacking the deck. Whether you're menopausal or not, start stacking the deck in your favor. And part of that is resistance training. Like it has to be in my opinion, it has to be the foundation for your movement program. Has to be resistance training, whether you like it or not. It's like, we're not going to talk about your feelings. I love your feelings. I want to listen to your feelings, but your feelings do not, like, we have to just look at data here. You have to make your resistance training the foundation of your movement program. And so for most people, I usually like to aim for something like a minimum of 2 times a week. More is better. Obviously, I'm training more because I love it, and I'm a bit of a psycho. So I love to train like 5 times, sometimes 6 times a week. But you don't need that to get results. Like you can get phenomenal results, not just in strength gains, but in muscle hypertrophy, which are 2 different outcomes, by training twice a week. And we can talk about some of the parameters there as well if you want to dive into that as well. But that's all really that it takes is like 2 times a week at the gym, or at the home or at the farm or wherever it is that you can sort of set yourself up with. That's all it really takes for you to start developing real strength and real hypertrophy in the muscle as well.
I agree. And I what I wanted to add, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just want people to understand that. And I don't want to say this to make anybody feel daunting, because you can build muscle at any age. However, from a clinical standpoint, I will tell you that things get a lot harder once you pass 50. You heal differently. Your regenerative properties change. And a lot of this has to do with hormones and stem cells and et cetera. However, the sooner the better. Like, I don't know how to get the pre-perimenopausal girlies to take heed right now. I'm talking in your 30s. This is the stuff you should be thinking about in your 30s and in your 40s, at the very latest, 40 years old. Like, if you can get a 10-year runway up to this, you're going to be sitting so much prettier than if you try to start after menopause. So I know that a lot of my listeners are menopausal and older. Actually, I think my age group predominantly, when I look at my insights, is like 35 to 65. And I know that there's women younger and older in my audience, but I'm telling you, start sooner than you think you need to. And I am a big proponent of starting hormones sooner than you think you need to, because of this exact reason, is the musculoskeletal impacts. I'm so excited that the musculoskeletal syndrome of menopause is being talked about now. And that's the work of Dr. Vonda Wright. And we're hearing about this more and more through social media. But I have been utilizing hormones and strength training in patients for decades. And it is truly non-negotiable. And so to reiterate what you said, like, I actually don't care about their feelings about it. Like, I don't want to hear about their feelings about it.
You don't have, your feelings are not
I don't care. Like this is not an option.
Yeah.
Like, you drink water, you breathe air, you eat nutritionally dense foods, and you strength train if you want to survive and thrive as you get older. Now, if you don't want to, and you want to just become dilapidated on the couch and be a burden on everyone else in your family, then go right ahead and continue on. And I'm not apologizing for that, because like, seriously, fuck around and find out. It's not a fun game. And it's really hard to reverse things once we start accumulating these orthopedic injuries.
Why do you think that it is so hard for, like, I hear a lot of, sort of myths that continue to perseverate, even though I don't know why. But what are some of the things that you hear about why women won't lift weights? Or, I mean, and the other qualifier I'll ask with this question is, why do you think that women don't push themselves to failure? Because I actually don't care that the weight is heavy or not. I actually care that you approximate muscle failure, and we can kind of get into that distinction a little bit too. But what has been your observation in terms of like what your community is saying in terms of why, like what is your sort of take on why you think women don't like to either lift heavy or approximate muscle failure?
Okay, so I'll start out with the most unkind opinion I have, and I think it's because humans are generally lazy.
Well, neurologically, we're wired for that.
Right.
We are
Exactly.
wired to expend the least amount of energy possible.
We're lazy primates, right? And so I don't say that as a personal diss on anyone, but we are. And I am guilty of it too. We're lazy primates. We shy away from discomfort. And I don't know what that personality trait is that you and I have that doesn't shy away from discomfort. Like, I go right into it and just let's go. Because I know on the other side, I'm going to get a huge dopamine rush out of it when I win. So, I like the challenge. Challenges are fun games for me. But I also think that it's a skill. I've thought about this a lot. That's such a good question that you asked me. I think it's a skill. And I don't think that skill is something you acquire by walking into a gym. It's something you actually have to invest time and money into, to hire somebody. And I think that until recently, we had there was just a real lack of qualified trainers. Not that they weren't good at training people, but we are literally just rounding the corner on this idea where trainers are starting to understand that hormones are important here too, and that training a middle-aged woman is an entirely different process than training a 25-year-old woman or a 25-year-old man. So I think that we are finally starting to see the professions meld in a beautiful way, and we're all having conversations with each other instead of turf wars. And so that understanding is starting to have this calories in, calories out model has to shift, right? And I think it's a skill. I think a lot of these women don't have the skill. They're intimidated by it. They're intimidated by the daunting task of learning the skill, and the skill takes years. I found to develop.
Decades.
Yeah. So it's a commitment to a process. And then if you don't start seeing the benefits of your hard work early on, because there is often pain involved, like it will hurt worse before it gets better. And especially if you're someone like me with a lot of autoimmune pain, like you will flare yourself up before you will get over that plateau. And that's a tough one. So I think that, I think there's a couple factors there. But man, if I think of all the dollars that Doge is digging up on all the BS that our tax dollars are going towards, it would be super interesting to see what that would look like going into well-trained strength and conditioning coaches who could help. Could you imagine, like, if those dollars were reconfigured into something worthwhile? Because we really have and I also think, I'll throw this in the hat, I think a lot of people were not active kids, and we're seeing that more and more and more. My daughter's generation is just wrought with people who were not active kids. I was a very active kid. So when I became inactive in my teenage years, I turned into like a chain smoking punk rock girl who just wanted to be as skinny as possible. And the muscle memories, that's truly a thing. Like, those satellite stem cells are there and they're ready to be reactivated because they were trained as a child. And so I think we have that piece too, of people who've literally never exercised. And now we're telling them, like, hey, honey, you're not going to age well. This isn't going to go well for you if you don't do something about it. And they're like, where do I start? What do I do?
Those are really good insights. Yeah, I would agree with all of those. And I think, you mentioned, like, what is it about the characteristics that someone can sort of wrestle with the pain and lean into the pain? I do agree with you. I think it is a skill that needs to be acquired. Anytime and this is why I always talk about, and we'll get into this a little bit, because we hear now, like, all these women that are in perimenopause and menopause. We all grew up cardio bunnies, and now we're all being told to be muscle mommies. And it's like, okay, I need to lift heavy now, I guess, but we don't have any, like, so many of these women don't have this motor pattern this like mind, they often call it like the mind muscle connection, but it's just essentially like a motor pattern, like the motor learning that you were talking about. And I think that, to layer onto that, I think that the word failure, just in general, the concept, not the word, the concept of failure is something that we all really shy away from. Nobody wants to look like a beginner. Nobody wants to suck. Everybody wants to sort of step into something and be able to sort of master it without a lot of effort. And one of the things that I've often found, at least in the gym, is when I am wrestling, when I'm approaching muscle failure, as you said, it's an uncomfortable process. It hurts. There's a lot of like metabolic debris that's building up. There's a lot of these metabolites that are building up in the muscle, and your muscle's like, can you please stop? And you're like, no, well, one more. I think that, to your point, this takes years to develop, but it also helps you get closer to who you are, because in life, there's going to be a lot of failures, right? I can tell you all like, I have a long list of all the ways that I have failed. And when you start to reorient yourself to failure in that it is a stepping stone towards being successful rather than something to avoid at all costs. And this is actually something, this is not muscle building per se, but this is something that I'm trying to teach my own children, where at the dinner table, we do something called glows. So it's like gratitude learned, opportunity wins. Like, what were your glows? So GLOW, feel free to steal if you'd like. But the other thing that I'll also say is, how'd you fail today? What were some of the things, what were the, like, and that's usually like the learn. So in the GLOW, it's like the learn is the fail. Like, where did you fail and what did you learn from it? And I think the more that we can talk about failure as a positive thing to work towards, the more I think that we can get more comfortable at approaching muscle failure in the gym, because so many women and I hold myself back in the gym because I see so many ladies, like the light weights. It's like, good for you, you're in here. Like,
Yeah.
kudos to you. But the 10-pound weights are no longer an appropriate weight for you to be holding when you're lunging. It's like, I've seen you do this for the last 3 years. You don't need this weight anymore. And so I think that this idea of pushing yourself maybe is a bit more of a, I don't want to say male quality. Like, I don't want to ascribe, like, I don't want to bring sex into it, but I feel like a male energy is like hunt, get, like, find, kill the boar, bring it back to the tribe, like hunt, succeed, like get the accolades, I think that male energy, will say, not necessarily like chromosomal.
It's warrior. It's warrior energy.
Yeah, it's warrior. Yeah. And so for a lot of women, like, I know that when I was giving birth to my children, I went from like Stephanie the happy, generally, whatever, like I went into, okay, it's like, it's go mode. Like, I turned into a primal animal. I was making noises I had never made before. And I think that, I get there in the gym as well. Not that I'm making those same primal noises, but it's like I turn into a little bit into that primal animal where it's like, I got to lift this goddamn barbell. It is like, I have a lot of weight on my body right now. If I do not stand up, I'm going to be crushed under this weight. So, that was a really long ramble. I'm not exactly sure where I was going with it, but I just wanted to add on to your very eloquent observations around why women are so reticent to really like sink their teeth in and take a bite out of real weight training.
I think you summed it up nicely, though, because maybe they're just afraid to step into their warrior goddess. I mean, it's in all of us. Some of us just have different versions. And I don't think women understand how strength training translates into real life, because I have a fearlessness about me. You thanked me on your podcast for being so brave and bold during COVID. And
yes.
I literally didn't have that inside of me if I hadn't had a strength training session in me that day. Like, it translates into bravery, because I'm thinking half the time when people come at me, I'm like, honey, I can deadlift you. I can pick you up and throw you aside. Not that I would. I don't mean to sound violent, but in my head, I'm just like, oh, you're like a little, your trolley noise is like a little mosquito to me, like it doesn't matter. Right. And when I train and I get into that mode, and to me, it's like Wonder Woman. I feel like I'm training my Wonder Woman side, and it's definitely like a warrior goddess energy that I'm having in there. And I am significantly stronger when I have Metallica blasting through my ears, or Tool, or, something loud and aggressive. And I love that part of myself. I mean, that's, that's that's the little girl that was out there getting in fist fights on the playground when I was a kid. Like I have that girl inside of me and I have to give her attention too. Otherwise, it turns into self-crippling and depreciating behavior. And I start to eat myself from the inside. I start to implode if I don't give her time. I don't know if that makes sense, but like she has to come out.
God, that makes so much sense.
Otherwise, I just want to be a real biatch. Like I start getting snarky and mouthy and mean to the people around me, or even the people in like my direct vicinity. If that dragon's coming up, I need to handle her in the gym. Yesterday, I was having a lot of PTSD. I went and testified in front of a committee about a bill that was being presented, and it's a long story, but it's involving my profession, and my profession really came at me in, the COVID years. And yesterday was just like so much tears and PTSD. Like it really triggered the PTSD from being witch hunted for so many years. And I couldn't figure out what to do with this energy. And I just kept crying, and everybody kept texting me and being like, how did it go? And I couldn't stop crying. So I was like, fuck this. And I just went out in the gym and just hammered it out there. And then I came back in and I'm like, I'm okay now. Everything's fine. Yeah. So there's that's such a beautiful tool to have. I kept saying during COVID, like, thank God I know how to train. Thank God I have the skill set, because it didn't matter that I was locked down. I'd already learned the skill. So I could just implement in my home, like thank God for the gyms. Thank God for strength training. Thank God for the skill that I invested money and time into to learn, because that will carry with me for the rest of my life. So.
And isn't that like just a life skill, right? It's like, here's another tool in the toolbox when shit hits the fan, that I can self-regulate myself in this way, and I can channel that energy, that rage and frustration and PTSD, like you were describing, into something productive rather than something destructive, right? Because it's very easy for you to spiral from that energy to kind of get back into potentially and there's like lots of different shades of this, but into that sort of victim mentality, like, why me? Why has this always happened to, that kind of thinking, which even though there's someone, when I look at you, you're so strong, you have such a strong mind. We all are susceptible to that kind of those sort of ruminating types of thoughts that can continue to circle and circle and circle. So what an important skill for you to say, I'm going to take this energy, which is all that is, right? All that PTSD, all that anxiety, that rage, that frustration, and I'm going to channel it into something that's really good for me. And, I just want to say as well, I think for a lot of women, we'd like to pretend like that rage doesn't exist. It's like, it absolutely does. And if you continue to pretend that it doesn't exist, it will control you rather than you being able to control it. So I would offer, get in touch with your inner rage, whatever it is, warrior, make friends with her, because she's going to help you. That part of you, that side of your personality, is going to help you in so many facets of life, like it helped you. And, I said to you on the show, and I'll say it here, like I honestly I am still in such admiration for your strength of character, to really go against your entire, like we were gag ordered. Like it's like, if you say the V word, if you talk about, and like you are losing your license, and we will persecute you, we will witch hunt you. Right. And you're just like one of the witches that
I've been burned a few times.
They tried to burn. They tried to crucify, tried to, shave off your head and behead you in the town square. And it's like, I'm still here, So
I just, I don't know that. Well, if I don't get that ragey girl her time in the gym or wherever it needs to go, it turns destructive, and I'll start to eat myself
alive. She shows
alive.
up elsewhere.
Yeah.
And she shows up elsewhere.
And I'm able to harness her and keep her calm and well-spoken if I've trained. If I haven't trained or haven't been training regularly, it just comes out as a lot of verbal diarrhea and gobbledygook and anger. And nobody wants to listen to an angry person. But you take somebody who is highly concerned and activated, who's calm, that's the Jedi power, right? And I don't think you can get into your Jedi zone. And the great scholars of the world knew this. Aristotle and Socrates, like those guys were all jacked. Those guys were all super fit and jacked. Like training was a just absolute core concept if you wanted to have a sound mind. So I don't know what people do who don't train. I'm just like, oh my God, I'm concerned these people are wandering around in the world making decisions.
They become keyboard cowboys. They
Yeah.
get online and they take it out on people online
But they
and or
vote.
other destructive. Yeah. Yeah.
They vote and they make
Yeah.
policies.
Yeah.
And they have power.
Yeah.
They are in positions of power. And I don't want anyone in a position of power who isn't physically fit, to be honest with you. Like,
It will be really great if it's like you want to have any position making any type of decision for healthcare. You have to show up. You have to have a dynamometer. So we have to we have to measure your grip strength. How much can you deadlift? How much can you squat? How many unassisted pull-ups can you do?
Or can you do a push-up?
Let's do a beep test.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see how fast you can run. Like let's see all of that stuff. What's your vertical jump? What's your wall sit? Like these would be qualifiers if I was in the government. If someone ever asked me like what should be, what kind of person should we have making decisions about our health? Is like, well, we should probably start with having healthy people. And then, this is how I would qualify it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. But because there's definitely a sixth sense, there's a superpower that you have when you have strength. And I know this because I gained it and I've lost it several times as injuries have set me back and I've had to start over. So for myself right now, where I'm at personally is I was doing step back lunges yesterday with 2 little 8-pound dumbbells. And I looked down and I was like, fuck. But you know what? Take your humble pie and start where you got to start. And for me, with what I have been through with my spine and my hips in the past few years and just all the stress really activating my psoriatic arthritis, I am back down to where I started in several of my lifts. I'm back down to where I started. And there's some lifts that are no longer available to me. And I have to take that, I just have to be humble and do with what I can.
And ego is the enemy in the gym.
Yeah,
ego is the absolute enemy. And this is why I was saying before, I don't actually care that you're lifting 8 pounds, like you're doing lunges with 8 pounds, like as long as you're getting to an RPE of 8, 9, or 10, which is rate of perceived exertion, 8, 9, or 10 in your set, like you could be doing 100 lunges. It doesn't matter. If you have the 8 pounds and you're like, okay, I am at an 8 out of 10 right now. Or the other way to look at it, which I tend to like a little bit better, is a reps in reserve, which is RIR. Yes. So how many reps left, right? It should be like between 1 and 3.
Yep. I love that.
And you know that you're getting there because the reps are slowing down, right? So you're not like rep 1 no longer looks like, let's say you're on rep 15. I don't know. Like your rep 1 and rep 15 look very different. Rep 1 is really fast. There's not a lot of struggle with it, but rep 15, you're struggling for the depth. You're struggling on the concentric, like to come back up to neutral or to your starting position again. And the subjective weight, like it feels like rep 15, like the 8 pounds actually feels like it's 800, right? So it feels heavier, right? So that's kind of, some guidelines or some action items for your listeners when they're like, but how heavy? It's like heavy doesn't matter. What matters is that you approximate muscle failure. So RPE of 8, 9, or 10, or RIR of 1, 2, or 3. And those are kind of the qualifiers, right? It's like, can I do one more rep? And can I do it in full range? And is the velocity slowing down? And does the subjective weight, like does the weight feel subjectively heavier to?
Or is your form, I'll just add one more, if your form starts falling apart.
Great. Yes,
just one good one left in the tank. So you got something to go on. If you got to run away from the zombies is how I think of it. And is your form, once your form starts breaking down, but everything you just said is so great. So talk more about that, because that's the biggest question I get is, well, what's heavy and how much weight are you lifting, Dr. Tina, in that video? I'm like, that's irrelevant what I'm lifting. What's heavy for you, right?
I know. Yeah, heavy is such a subjective term. So if you're new to the gym, like I was saying before, the 10-pound weights for lunges might be the best weight for you. But if you're still at 10 pounds, like 6 months later, you're not using some of the principles of progressive overload. So heavy, like I said, and like you said, very subjective. The weight literally doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that you have good form and technique. That's the only thing I care about. And that you're approaching muscle failure. Those are like the two things. So for you have PA, right? You have psoriatic arthritis, which is an autoimmune condition where we see active destruction of the joints. So for you, I would even layer on top of that when we're talking about arthritides. So like PA, RA, rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis, the other the other goal for someone who has an arthritis, in addition to what we just talked about, is actually preserving range of motion, because we know that there's a progressive destruction of the joints, either the in between the bones in the capsule, or the bones themselves become deformed, and then sort of late stage disease. We actually see both of those things happen. So for you, it's not even about lifting heavy. Like the 8 pounds actually might be excellent for you as long as your range of motion is full and pain free. Right. So whatever your range of motion is in that pain-free range, because a lot of, and I've dealt with a lot of women with arthritis. That's the other thing that we get hit with in our menopausal years, is like all these arthritic diseases. So you want to be thinking about a range of motion, ideally full range of motion. But if full range of motion isn't available to you, whatever pain-free range of motion you can do, with an aim over time to extend that. And that doesn't necessarily mean progressing with weights. It just means progressing with the range, like either passive range. So a practitioner is doing this for you, or active, where you are engaging your muscles to move whatever joint or capsule that we're talking about. So active and passive range of motion. We want to be protecting both of those things.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's how I would qualify, like, how heavy should I lift, is like, do you have an arthritis? If you do, heavy shouldn't be and even if you don't have an arthritis, the heaviest weight that you could possibly lift is not the goal, because when you choose a weight that's very, very heavy, your body's going to figure out some way to move it, but it's probably not the way that it's probably not the muscles that you want to move. So I'll give you a really good example. Deadlifts or squats. Often when the weight is too heavy, what you'll see is that the erector spinae group, so the lower back muscles in the lower back, will actually start to engage at the bottom of the squat rather than the glutes to initiate that lift. And that's because the weight is too heavy. You've overwhelmed the glutes, because the glutes are in an inherently weak position at the bottom of a squat. They're long, which is where all the muscle growth happens. But if the weight is too heavy for the glutes to overcome that, other muscles are going to try and lift. So the lower back is going to start lifting. You're going to start leaning forward to engage those erector spinae. Your quads are going to take over. Hammies are going to take over. You might have some asymmetry from left to right. So like one knee might cave in more than the other. And so now you have adductors that are working differently, like the inner thigh muscles that are working differently from left to right. So I would say that heavy weight is great if you have the motor memory. Like if you were someone like Dr. Tina, who was doing all of these activities as a young child, and she has the motor memory that she can re-engage. But if you're new to muscle building, and even if you're I've been lifting for decades, but even if you're kind of a seasoned lifter, your number one priority should always be good technique. Because we know when we see good technique in the gym, because it's such a rare event. We always see people squatting to 90 degrees. We see them falling forward with the chest. We see the genu valgum, which is like the collapsing of the knees. We see the ankles that are super tight, so we don't have good ankle dorsiflexion. We see like everything falls apart with a squat is, sort of like the big equalizer in the gym, because no one can do it well. I remember when I was in private practice, I would have people squat. I was like, show me a body weight squat. And most people would stop at about 90 degrees. No one would be able to do the ass to the grass squats, which is really a hallmark. If you look at toddlers, these are basically giving us a master class in biomechanics, right? They can just get all the way down. They can observe the worm or whatever they're looking at on the grass. They can just hang out in that ass to the grass full squat for as long as they want. Their arches are not collapsing in. They don't have to unnecessarily turn the feet out in order to get down there. They could just like stay down there and hang out there. They don't have the butt wink sign, all this kind of stuff. And so as we sit through kindergarten and computer work, and you go through high school and college and all the things, we sit a lot, right? So that lengthening, let's say, of the glutes happens. We don't have in our everyday life opportunities where we have that deep ankle flexion. And so we lose that. So when we go to the gym now, because we've been cardio bunnies for 20 years, because that was in vogue in 1980s, 1990s, whatever. And now we're supposed to be muscle mommies. We've lost that. And you can add on like cushy shoes with the elevated heel, shortening the Achilles tendon, which attaches to the calcaneus and the gastroc. So now you have this sort of, you're always in this like slightly elevated position. You don't have that dorsiflexion anymore in the ankle. It's gone. It's been gone for years. So I don't care about heavy. I just care about good technique. Yeah. So kind of back to your original, like what is like how heavy should we be lifting? We should be lifting heavy such that the velocity is slowing down towards the last couple of reps. Your RPE is like 8, 9, or 10. It feels much heavier. You're starting to see your form break down, as you were saying. So you're starting to see like the knee caving in a little bit, or you're getting stuck, or full range of motion is no longer available to you. And if you're someone who's dealing with an arthritis, we are trying to also just preserve the range of motion of the joint. We don't actually care how heavy it is. And even if you don't have an arthritis, I don't have an arthritis, I don't care how heavy my weight is. I just care that I'm working the muscle to muscle failure.
Yes, that's perfect. I'll add one thing as the person with the psoriatic arthritis. I may be able to achieve everything you just said in the gym, and I still will light up like a Christmas tree the next day or the next. Sometimes it'll send me into a massive flare. And so that's the kind of terrible unknown that happens. And you have to start to really listen to your body and pay attention to your body. And so I'll say this for anyone who's working with a trainer: be very vocal about your boundaries if you do have an arthritis. And that's an inflammatory arthritis condition for those listening. So rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis. Be very vocal.
Even autoimmunity too.
Yeah, like don't light yourself up.
There's like, yeah, I can't tell you how many women with Hashimoto's, and maybe this is like the personality of a person with Hashi's. Like she also is very much an achiever, accolade oriented kind of person, doesn't know her own physical boundaries because she's sort of ignored them, but she'll go to the gym and she'll work out at like a 10 out of 10 intensity and then be bedridden for like a week and a half because she's completely overwhelmed her immune system, which is already compromised, right? And RA and PA, these are like, you can sort of make the argument that these are also autoimmune conditions as well. They are.
Oh yeah.
Rheumatoid. These are autoimmune conditions. So your immune system is already compromised, and you need your immune system in order to heal from that hormetic stress, like from the stress of working out, right? So, I would also say if you're a woman dealing with any type of autoimmune, like lupus or like whatever it is, go in and say, okay, whatever I think is intense, I'm going to go in and do 50% of that. Because the recovery, as you very well know, is going to be treacherous. It's going to be long and drawn out.
Yes.
It's going to be very painful. And so we do have to, unfortunately, for our autoimmune warriors, you do have to recognize the finite limitations of your matter.
Yes. There's a big difference between me really hitting it hard and then waking up the next 2 days in so much pain that I have to get out of bed an hour before my husband wakes up and an hour before, I have to literally get out of bed because I'm in pain and I've lit my spine up, and it puts a massive dent in our sex life. And I feel awful and everything hurts the whole day, and I can't sit too long and I can't stand too long. And I'm like, oh my God, I lit myself on fire. I should not have gone so hard, versus me putting my ego in check and maybe stepping back a little bit. And I share all this because I get a lot of this type of question from my audience. I'm sure you do too, because there's a lot of women who are just sort of living on that edge of autoimmune, even if they don't know it. And they're like, I feel awful after I work out. Big difference between me putting the ego in check and like going at 50, 60%, having a nice, good session, coming out of there feeling sprightly and happy and accomplished and, good mindset at the time, and then going to bed, sleeping well, getting up, having intimacy with my husband in the morning, having a fun morning, and not being in horrible pain all day. Like, big difference between how hard I go. So this is why I always say, like, my heavy is not your heavy, and my heavy isn't even my own heavy day to day.
Right. Yeah.
And that all depends on where my nervous system is at. Like, am I getting hammered from stress? Have I been traveling a lot? Have I been not staying on my, have I been hitting my protein macros? All of those things play a factor in how hard you can go in the gym. Sleep, all those things. That,
because even the same individual is going to be different week to week to week, depending on the stressors that you have and the demands in your life. I love that you said that.
Yeah.
So wise.
Yeah. So I just call it my old lady workouts. I'm just trying to keep, really, like you said, mobility, range of motion. I'm not even, I used to have a great butt and I had a great figure, and it's not even there anymore, but I don't care. I just want to be pain-free. I want to sleep well. I want to have a good libido. I want to not be in pain when I'm having intimacy. Like, those all matter a lot to me. So you have to put into perspective what your goals are, and those are all different for each of us too. My goals 10 years ago were totally different than my goals now. My goals were very physical oriented. I just wanted to look hot in a bikini. And now I just want to not break a hip or not have hip pain or not have crippling spinal pain or not have whatever it is, So set what your goals are. And those may not match your coach or your strength coach. So that's why I say, like, have fierce boundaries and be vocal and teach them as you go, because I think that a good coach knows how to train a variety of different clients and a variety of ages and a variety of limitations. That's a good coach, right? It's not just, can they
I love that.
hammer it out and make you turn into a sweat angel or whatever.
Yeah, like anyone can overdo, like, squats and deadlifts. If you're going to get sore, it's because you're like, anyone can overdo like anyone can give you 10 sets of squats and lunges and deadlifts so you can't work out. Like anyone can do that. I think it takes someone a little bit more experienced, maybe a bit more refined and some self-restraint to be able to coach you through a lighter workouts that you actually feel good at the end of the work. Like you should feel, I like to feel good. I don't like to feel like I've completely trashed my body
Yes.
at the end of a workout.
Yes.
I like to feel like, yeah, I feel really good. I have more energy now. I feel strong. Like I feel proud of myself. Like those are some of the qualifiers that I like to sort of look at. And the other thing I'll say is, and I was talking about, I'm coaching, I'm doing sort of a studies now where I'm in the process of writing my next book and I'm running women through these programs. One of the things I was saying the other night to them was, I want you to look at weight training as like a love letter to your body. You said something before, and I was like, oh, so good. You said, I used to work out like to really look good in a bikini. And I think we all really got into fitness for some vain reason, and that's all fine. But I also think that as you continue on your weightlifting journey, that it's certainly, yeah, I still want to look good. Like I'm not, that doesn't go away, but I lift now as a celebration, in terms of what I've been able to achieve over the many years that I've been lifting. And it's a love letter, to my body. And I've had a couple of people comment on, sometimes I'll put, like my workouts on my Instagram or whatever to share with people. And I've had people comment like, the way that you lift is very different than what I typically see. So often when we look online, men and women, it's like all black, not that there's anything wrong with heavy metal music, but it's like, it's all heavy metal. It's like, you have to kill yourself to like do this like circuit or whatever that they're doing. And I like to lift very slowly. I like to be very intentional. My eyes often close and I'm in my body, usually barefoot, or not barefoot, but like in my socks. And I've had a lot of women comment, like, it seems like, not that it's like sensual, but kind of like that, like that kind of energy where it's not like, it's like, oh, I had too much to eat yesterday, so I have to do this lunge thing. It's like, I love how much I can lunge. So I am just going to luxuriate in this feeling, and that's what I also want people to take away, that your lifting can be a celebration of movement. It can be a celebration of the symphony of your joints and your tendons and your muscles and your nervous system working together. And it can absolutely be something, it can be a love letter to yourself. Like, look at what I can do, like, look at this deadlift that I can do. And who cares what the weight is, but look how good I can do it. Look at this technique,
I think the word luxuriate is such a good word for that. That happened to me the other day. I was doing, I'm really loving, I'm so sad. I can't do barbell squats anymore, and I can't load my spine too heavy. So
well, it's axial loading.
Yeah,
right?
I cannot so even if I do like a hex bar deadlift, the axial loading. So the heavy lifts are not available to me right now. And it's so sad because every time I do, and I get some kind of axial load on my discs, I don't get disc pain. I get like, I can't even describe it. It is spinal pain. It's like it's like somebody plugged me in like a Christmas tree. And it's terrible. So anyway, I was like, okay, I can move past this. And so I've been doing cable kickbacks where I have the cable set at like just at knee height, and I load them heavy, and I do it with a bent knee and I push back. And I was doing them the other day, and I was like getting that feeling that I get when I squat, which is whatever that dopamine hit is or whatever the CNS hit is. But I wasn't in pain. And I was like, oh, I'm loving this so much. And I was having that same moment. I was just celebrating that I could move in a pain-free manner and My spine was getting some mobility with it because it was unilateral. So I was like celebrating the fact that I was doing something unilateral. Like I was just celebrating myself in the moment. And I thought, you know, the real tell is how am I going to feel in 2 days? Like that's always the big tell. Even with my coach, he's like, how's that feel? I'm like, it doesn't matter how it feels now. My immune system will tell us how it feels in 2 days, you know? So
Right, right,
and
right.
that's
Yes.
not always up to the move. It might, again, be all my other lifestyle that's going on. So anyway, 2 days,
And
two,
how was it?
2 days
Yeah.
later, I rolled over and my spine released in a way that, because my spine loves to fuse up, it released in a way that it hasn't released in so long, like segments that haven't moved, even the chiropractor can't get to move. And I was like, hallelujah, I found something that I can do. So like put that on the list of can do's instead of ruminating on the I can't do anymore. You know, like
I love that. That's so good. And that's another kind of example of maybe you can't axial load the squat anymore, but there's literally an infinite amount of variations that you can do to still hit those target muscles to get that dopamine that you're feeling and to, and to get your spine, like to not overstimulate the spine and the nervous system and the discs and the joints. There's so many different ways that you can do it. Like you can do belted squats, you
yeah,
can do hip thrust, you can do all the other, maybe those things work for you, maybe they
they
don't. But
do.
if you can't
Yeah,
axial load anymore, maybe a belted, like, I don't know if
I
if
do.
you're working out at a gym or in your home, but like a belted squat would be great because now the spine is not taking that load anymore, but you're still squatting,
Yep.
right? So there's a lot of different ways that we can, give variations for a variety of different, conditions and
Yeah.
concerns.
So it takes a lot of trial and error and just patience and be humble and be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself, whether you have issues like I do or not. Just be kind to yourself. I think that a lot of women are, that it goes back to your question. I think a lot of women just aren't very kind to themselves. And I don't even know if we could say, oh, they don't want to look dumb or they don't want to fail. Like they're just not nice to themselves. They just talk shit to themselves all day. And so they tell themselves they can't do this or this isn't for them. Or,
I struggle with that. I struggle with that too. Like sometimes I'll catch that gremlin in my mind that's like, you're not doing enough. You're not, duh, duh, duh." And I'm like, oh, there you are. So we all struggle with that. I think that that's a universal, I don't want to say I don't want to say everyone, but I would say most women that I have spoken to, and that just might be me attracting other me's into my life. But most women struggle with that kind of, self, depreciating self-talk. I think that we're taught to hate ourselves. I think that
yeah.
we're taught like you're never going to be pretty enough or smart enough or capable enough or successful enough or a good enough mother, a good enough doctor, whatever category, whatever category. You're never going to be enough unless you do this next thing, right? Unless you buy this mascara, unless you have this bag, unless you live in this house, you drive this car, you marry this type of person, you wear these types of clothes. There's always this like you're never this external dangling carrot that we've been brought up on. And I think that, you've really been a really good, sort of demonstrably shown that you can really, in many ways, unhitch that need to have that external validation and really start to look within for your own internal validation. That's been certainly my journey. But do I completely never get bothered when someone says something online, or do I completely never have that voice that tells me that I'm not doing enough? No, she's like, it's like Thelma and Louise. Like we're just, we're just together for the long run, right? But I just learned to listen to her. And it's like, oh, okay. So am I tired? Am I hungry? Like why can I hear her so clearly right now? And then am I the recipient or the observer of that voice? Right? Is it she's speaking to me, or can I just observe that voice and say, well, that's interesting. I wonder why that voice is coming up. Is she trying to protect me? Is there something fearful? Like why is that voice coming here? I know she wants to keep me safe and keep me small, but why is she trying to do that? So
I just take her to the gym. I just say, we're going to the gym now. We're going to sort it out in there. And usually she gets very, I call her my little insecure 12-year-old. She's like a tape track that plays in my head, and I was like, eject the tape right now. I don't want to listen to this.
Yeah.
You hit a good point that I think we should close with, which is, am I tired? Am I hungry? I think the beauty, we've talked a lot about strength training, but the real beauty and the real benefits come with the refeed and the rest. So let's talk on that.
Sure. Yeah. I like you, very much a protein first or protein forward style of eating. I think this is maybe the one macronutrient requirement that changes as we age. We do need to be consuming more protein because we tend to become more what's called anabolic resistant, which means the muscle just doesn't like to grow as much as you were saying in menopause and beyond as it does when we are in our fertile years and our reproductive years. So protein, definitely like to consume maybe more protein than what, certainly more protein than what the RDA. I typically will usually consume something like 1 gram per pound of body weight, but honestly, it's often north of that. So, I'm about $1.40. So I probably am consuming like, 150 to 160 grams of protein on a daily basis. Not that everybody needs to do that, but that's just what I find works really well for me. So protein, I really like. I'm also a big believer in carbohydrates. I think that carbohydrates, and I will say in the sort of, spirit of truth and honesty and transparency, I have also contributed to this because I ran for many years and I still believe in the ketogenic diet. I ran sort of a female-centric ketogenic diet for women who are trying to reverse insulin insensitivity. We know that this is phenomenally successful, but one of the problems with the ketogenic diet, particularly for women, if they're following it for too long, is actually they become more insulin insensitive over time. And we start to see thyroid issues if they're not consuming enough carbohydrates. But they develop this what would you call it? Like dysmorphia, like this fear of carbohydrates. Like, oh, it's because I stopped eating carbohydrates, I lost all this weight, I'm never going to eat
Yes.
carbohydrates again. It's like wrong. You were consuming a low carbohydrate diet because you were metabolically unhealthy. You are no longer that. So now we can change your diet because your body now is going to respond to the stimulus a little bit differently. But I find that a lot of women are so petrified of carbohydrates. And they do not consume enough carbohydrates. So I like to tell people like fruit is your friend. Like fruit is not going to make you fat. Like, I have women that are so scared of just consuming fruit. It's ridiculous. So fruit, I like to actually consume fruit almost at every meal, truthfully. And then some of the good carbohydrates that are like kind of a mainstay in the house are like always vegetables. I always prep them because I never feel like whenever I'm hungry, I already want the food ready for me. Like I always prep the broccoli is already pre-cut, so I'm ready to go. I'm ready to snack on that stuff. Like all the green leafy vegetables, certainly potatoes and rice, yams, sweet potato. All these things have like there's on constant rotation in my home because I feel like these are really great carbohydrates. My boys play competitive soccer, so there's like bananas everywhere. Like there's always carbohydrates in the house, and I think that if women can sort of heal their relationship to carbohydrates, I think we'd be better off. We certainly know that they make us feel good. They help, like I was mentioning before, with thyroid function. They help convert, like when insulin is elevated, of course, we convert inactive thyroid hormone T4 to active thyroid hormone T3. In the gut, that happens in the liver and in the muscles as well. So very, very important to be thinking about carbohydrates and the muscle. Like we've been talking about the musculoskeletal system, but the muscle is one of the sites where we see inactive to active thyroid hormone converted. So
100%.
very important there. So carbs very important. And then the other thing you mentioned is sleep. I think that sleep is the panacea for recovery. And this is, of course, one of the most common things that women in perimenopause start to complain about is like the initiation and the continuation of sleep, right? Like they can't initiate or maintain their sleep. So to your point before around hormones, I think that this may be first, you have to make sure that you have like a good sleep, like you're not like doom scrolling on Instagram in your bed, with all the LED lights
Yeah,
on,
sleep
like we
hygiene,
want to be
people.
thinking, yeah. So nice sleep hygiene. Most of you know what that is anyway. Like most of you, if you're listening to the show, this has been covered on previous podcasts and you're also already intelligent enough to know that your phone shouldn't be in your bedroom. Your lights should be low. There should be some type of transition routine from day to night. For me, that ends up being like my skincare routine. So I'm like oils in my hair and my face and taking my makeup off and castor oil and all the stuff. So that's sort of like my brain's cue that it's like, oh, it's bedtime now, right? So some type of transition routine, really helpful. Reading, all that beautiful stuff, orgasm with a partner or yourself. So all these beautiful things kind of setting up sleep well. And then if you're like, hey, yeah, I've mastered all of that, then, have the conversation with your naturopathic doctor or with your PCP around progesterone. Probably, not probably, definitely low for women in their 40s. We see this sort of stepwise, like kind of attenuation in progesterone as we progress through that, which does affect sleep. And then of course that affects anxiety and mood and emotional regulation, and of course digestion, and sleep certainly is kind of the big one that a lot of women notice.
Yes, it's key. Don't mess around with the sleep. Sleep is everything. If that's the only reason women seek out hormonal replacement therapy is to optimize their sleep, it is worth it, because if your sleep is off, everything is off. Your metabolic health is off, everything you just listed. The one thing that I hear from women when they go on HRT is, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how messed up my sleep was. I'm sleeping again.
Yeah.
Like, what a godsend to be sleeping again. I've had my sleep leave me at times, and it was always when I was super stressed out and super skinny. The skinnier I get, I lose my fat depot. My fat depot is my estrogen reserve. I lose that. Wheels fall off the car. And so these are all things that I think about constantly when I have folks ask me questions online. I go look at their profile, and I usually can look at people and tell you pretty quickly what's going on, just by, it's not a judging thing. It's just a skill set. And in many cases, I'm like, oh, I just want to bathe them in progesterone and estrogen right now.
Yeah, there's some people will comment on my Instagram feed, and I say this with love. It's like, you know what you really need? You really need to come.
Yeah,
seriously. You need to just feel that post-orgasmic bliss that you are clearly not getting in your life to leave a comment like this.
Yes.
So
yes,
yeah.
Carrie Jones and I are on a text thread, and we often talk about that. Like women who are taking good care of that way, or taking care of themselves that way, tend to be much happier, more amicable humans. They just need some estrogen and some big O, and
the big O, baby. Yeah. In my first book, I actually put an orgasm challenge in the book. I was like, you're going to orgasm, take a picture of your face on Monday, and you're going to orgasm for 7 days straight. So every day, like one orgasm a day, and then take a picture the next Monday and compare those two pictures. And you tell me. And I had people all over the world when the book came out. They're like, oh my God, like my skin, my eyes are whiter, everything is plumper, like my cheeks are plumper. They couldn't believe it, right? Inflammation is better, like all these different things. So, to revive that, if you want to try, if that's the action item that you want to take from this podcast.
Perfect.
7-day orgasm challenge.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. That's genius. That's genius. Out with the immune boosting benefits, there's a lot there. We could have a whole podcast on that. I love it. Well, I just adore you, lady. I know that my listeners are going to too, and they're all going to come bum rushing wherever you are. So tell them all how to find you.
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you so much. So I have a podcast like you. It's called Better with Dr. Stephanie. Just encapsulates my philosophy for life. It's not about being the best. It's just about being better. We have, world-class leaders and thought leaders like yourself on the show. We talk about nutrition, fitness, stress management, hormones, all the things. I am currently writing my book, which will be out sometime next year. So that's in the process. But what we're doing in anticipation of that book is I'm actually running cohorts of perimenopausal women. So we're running these coaching groups. They're 8 weeks in length, and we're talking about nutrition and fitness. So I don't know exactly when this show is coming out, but the next one that we're going to be running is going to be in March. So I'll send you all the links if you want to put them in the show notes for people to kind of figure out. And then the other free places to find me, obviously on Instagram, Dr. Stephanie Estima, and then drstephanieestima.com is sort of like the main hub of all these things. If you don't remember anything I just said, just go to drstephanieestima.com and it's all there, all the stuff to say.
Perfect. I will make sure everything's in the show notes so people can come find you, because I know that my audience is going to jive with this. So thank you so much for coming on. I always have so much fun talking to you, and I feel like we need our own podcast where you and I just have a glass of wine and
it's tell me what you really feel.
I just adore you. Thank you for being on this planet. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Dr. Tina Show. This is a Wellness Loud production produced by Drake Peterson and mixed by Mike Fry. Theme song is by John the Guilt. You can watch the full video version of this podcast inside the Spotify app or on YouTube. As always, you can email the podcast at podcast@drtyna.com. That's DRTYNA. And if you like this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can also find all of my offerings on my website at drtyna.com. For more shows by my team, go to wellnessloud.com. See you next time, and thanks for listening. This podcast is for general informational purposes only. It does not constitute the practices of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. I am a doctor, but I am not your doctor. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content on this podcast is intended not to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions.